In the heart of the Punjab, a land of 5 mighty rivers, lay a kingdom both ancient and proud. This was the domain of a king the Greeks would come to know as Porus. His lands were nestled between the Jhelum, the Chenab known in antiquity as the Hydaspes, the Essenes, a fertile, vibrant territory, lifeblood drawn from waters flowing down from the great Himalayas. The Pauravas, the tribe Porus, likely belonged to heirs to a long and storied tradition. People of the plains history intertwined with the soil cultivated and defended with unwavering courage. It was a kingdom that understood its own worth, its own history, its own place in the grand tapestry of ancient India. Bustling towns, agricultural wealth, landscape dotted with villages planting the harvest, the monsoon rains, the dry heat. The year was 326 BC. A storm of conquest, born in the mountains of Macedonia, was now breaking upon the plains of India. Alexander the Great, having shattered the mighty Persian Empire, had pushed his weary but seemingly invincible army across the formidable Hindu Kush mountains. He had come to the edge of what he considered the world, driven by an insatiable desire for glory and discovery. His arrival in the Punjab sent shockwaves through the region's political landscape. The local rulers, the rajas and kings of the various small states were faced with a stark choice: submit to this foreign conqueror, or face the full might of his battle-hardened legions. It was a moment of reckoning for the proud kingdoms of ancient India. Many chose the path of pragmatism. Ambi, the ruler of the neighboring kingdom of Taxila, located west of the Jhelum, saw little to be gained from resistance. He had his own rivalries, particularly with Porus, and perhaps saw an alliance with Alexander as a strategic advantage. He welcomed the Macedonian army with open arms, offering supplies, troops, and his personal allegiance. He laid his kingdom's treasures at Alexander's feet, hoping to secure his own position in the new order. For Alexander, this submission was exactly what he expected. It was the pattern he had seen across Asia Minor, Egypt and Persia. Kings bowed, empires fell, and the world bent to his will. But not all kings were like Ambi. Across the fast-flowing waters of the Jhelum River, King Porus heard of Ambi's submission with what one can only imagine was profound disdain. He was a man of a different metal. The idea of bowing to a foreign invader, of surrendering his kingdom's sovereignty without a fight, was anathema to him. When Alexander's envoys arrived at his court demanding that he pay tribute and meet Alexander at his border, Porus sent back a reply that would become legendary. He declared that he would indeed meet Alexander at the border, but he would do so armed for battle, ready to defend his homeland. This was not arrogance, it was a statement of principle. It was the voice of a king who would not trade honor for security. Porus's defiance was a direct challenge to Alexander's authority and his aura of invincibility. Here was a local ruler whose kingdom was but a fraction of the empire Alexander had conquered, standing firm. This act of resistance immediately set Porus apart from his contemporaries. While others calculated the odds and chose submission, Porus chose to stand on his honor and the valor of his people. He began to mobilize his army, gathering his infantry, his formidable cavalry, his terrifying corps of war elephants. The stage was being set for a confrontation that would pit two of the ancient world's greatest military minds against each other. The storm had arrived, but a mountain stood in its path. The monsoon season was beginning to swell the rivers of the Punjab. The Jhelum, or Hydaspes, was now a raging, formidable barrier of water, nearly a mile wide in places. On the eastern bank, King Porus assembled his forces. His army was a magnificent sight, a testament to the power of his kingdom. Thousands of infantry soldiers stood ready, their swords glinting in the humid air, longbows glinting. His cavalry, expert horsemen from the Punjabi plains, patrolled the riverbank. But the centerpiece of his army, its heart and soul, was the line of nearly 200 war elephants. These colossal beasts, adorned with battle armor, carrying towers filled with archers and javelin throwers, were a terrifying psychological weapon. Porus believed they would be the key to shattering the Macedonian formations. On the opposite bank, Alexander and his Macedonians surveyed the scene. They had faced down vast armies and formidable fortifications, but this was a new and daunting challenge. The river was a major obstacle, and the sight of the elephants arrayed for battle was deeply unnerving for his men, and crucially, for their horses. Alexander knew a direct frontal assault across the swollen river would be suicidal. His troops would be exposed and disorganized as they emerged from the water, easy prey for Porus's waiting army. The conqueror for once was held in check. For weeks the two armies faced each other across the torrent, a tense stalemate in the sweltering monsoon heat. It was a battle of wits and wills before the first spear was even thrown. Alexander, ever the master of strategy and deception, began a campaign of psychological warfare. He needed to lull Porus into a false sense of security. He marched his troops noisily up and down his side of the riverbank each night, making feints and pretending to prepare for a crossing at various points. He sent boats out into the current only to recall them. At first, Porus diligently mirrored these movements, rushing his elephants and soldiers to counter every perceived threat. But as the days turned into weeks, Alexander's actions began to seem predictable, like a nightly ritual with no real intent. Porus and his commanders started to relax their vigilance, believing Alexander was simply biding his time, waiting for the river to subside. This was precisely the reaction Alexander had hoped for. Behind this curtain of elaborate deception, the Macedonian king was meticulously planning his real move. He had identified a crossing point about 17 miles upstream, at a bend in the river that was screened by a wooded island. It was a risky maneuver that would involve splitting his forces and leaving a significant portion of his army behind under the command of his general Craterus. This detachment was given clear instructions to stay put and act as a decoy, only crossing if Porus moved the bulk of his army, especially the elephants, away from their position. The plan was audacious, relying on secrecy, speed, and the element of surprise. The fate of the battle would be decided in a single, daring nighttime operation. Under the cover of a fierce thunderstorm that conveniently masked the sounds of his movements, Alexander set his plan in motion. He led a hand-picked force of his best infantry and cavalry on a long march upstream to the concealed crossing point. The storm raged, thunder echoing and the rain lashing down, providing the perfect acoustic camouflage. They crossed the turbulent river in makeshift boats and on inflated animal skins, a difficult and perilous operation in the dark. As dawn broke, they were on Porus's side of the river, undetected. However, their landing had not been on the mainland, but on another large island, forcing a second, more difficult wading passage through a deep channel. By the time they finally reached the eastern bank, the element of surprise was partial, but the crucial maneuver had succeeded. Alexander was profoundly moved by Porus's courage and kingly response. Instead of treating him as a captive, Alexander did something remarkable. He not only granted Porus his freedom but also confirmed him as the ruler of his own kingdom. The conqueror recognized that a man of such stature was more valuable as a loyal ally than as a resentful prisoner. By treating Porus with honor, Alexander was making a powerful political statement to the other rulers of India. He was showing that loyalty and bravery would be rewarded, and that his new empire could be one of collaboration rather than just brutal subjugation. It was a masterful act of political theater, but it was also born of genuine respect. This act of magnanimity went even further. Alexander not only restored Porus's kingdom but also added to it the lands of other neighboring tribes who had been subdued. Porus, who had lost a battle, ironically emerged with a larger territory to govern than he had before. He became Alexander's most trusted Indian subordinate, a satrap, who would administer these easternmost provinces of the Macedonian Empire. An unlikely alliance was forged on the banks of the Hydaspes, built on the mutual respect between two formidable warriors. Porus, in turn, pledged his loyalty and provided valuable counsel and support for the remainder of Alexander's time in India. With Alexander's departure in 325 BC, a power vacuum began to form across his vast, newly forged empire. Porus was left in a powerful but precarious position. He was the most prominent ruler in the Punjab, his authority backed by the legitimacy Alexander had bestowed upon him. He governed his expanded territories, a region stretching from the Jhelum to the Bays, navigating the complex political currents left in the wake of the Macedonian invasion. He was a local king but also a representative of a distant imperial power. He had to balance the interests of his own people with the demands of the Greek garrisons and officials. It was a time of uneasy coexistence and shifting allegiances. The news of Alexander the Great's sudden death in Babylon in 323 BC threw the entire empire into chaos. His generals, the Diadochi, immediately began to vie for control, carving up the territories among themselves. The remote provinces in India were far from that power struggle, and Greek authority in the Punjab grew fragile. The wars of the Diadochi,